So one of the biggest challenges I see with finance is that there are so many opinions, theories, concepts, strategies, whatever, that distract many of us from a few basic principles that can significantly enrich us financially. And basics like spend less than you make, use your employer-sponsored retirement plan, avoid debt on depreciating assets, use diversification in your investing, and giving generously are all concepts that will benefit us greatly if we practice them well enough. But eventually, as we move beyond these basic monetary disciplines, we'll begin to accumulate and save for our future, whatever we hope that looks like. More specifically, one day, we'll all need to answer the question, how much do I need? Now, the answer to that question is unique to all of us, and that's primarily why it's such a challenge to address. But in this video, we're going to walk you through a step-by-step path to calculating how much you need to fund your own retirement. Now, from here on out, I'm going to refer to that as your numbers. So when you hear those words or see those words, just know that's the goal that we're aiming for. It's how much you need to save. Now, also, as I talk about your number, remember that this too is an approximation. Even if you go to great lengths to calculate every nickel and dime that you plan to spend in retirement, life will bring unexpected changes, making obsolescence of even the most thoroughly conceived plans. Instead of hyper-analyzing it, I suggest learning how to measure and adjust your financial plans frequently as you age. The process I'm about to outline is a handy way to do that. Step one is to calculate your current monthly expenses. There are a seemingly endless number of retirement calculators available on the internet these days. Some are good, some are not. But if a given retirement calculator doesn't start by challenging you to identify the amount of money you plan to spend in the future, then you shouldn't trust it to accurately provide a forecast of your number. Most calculators make assumptions based on your current income. Most of them guess you'll spend about 80% of whatever that amount is annually when you enter retirement. I suppose it's not a terrible guess, but it's still just a guess. For more certainty, you need to project your annual spending needs in retirement. I'm not saying this will be an easy task, but it's necessary if you want an accurate goal. Now, the spending number will require further refinement, which I'll get to in a minute, but for now, you just want a baseline. So hopefully you're already keeping a budget and you have a relatively clear picture of just how much your monthly expenses are. If you don't have a budget, now is a good time to start. If you need help, use your bank statements, credit card statements, anything that tracks your actual spending to kind of refresh your memory and help you build it. Step two is to deduct or cut out any expenses that you won't have in the future. So next, after you've got your monthly or annual spending amount, you need to remove any expenses that you don't think you'll have when you reach retirement. Two of the more common expiring expenditures that I see are paid off mortgages and reduced living expenses because kids move out of the house. Now, with that said, there could be other debts you'll have paid off or expenses related to work that you won't have anymore. Make sure you account for all those. It can be a challenge to think of everything and project it, but the more accurate you can be, the closer your number will be when you actually calculate it. Step number three is to add any new future expenses you expect to have. For example, it's not uncommon at all for retirees to begin traveling a lot more than they did before they retired. Some buy vacation properties, or they build space to engage in a new hobby on their house or doing renovations. The fact is, a lot of people actually spend more in retirement, not less. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that unless you fail to account for it and don't have enough money for it when you retire. Also, you need to be sure to account for any increased medical costs that you might have here. This is especially true for early retirees who have to cover the gap between insurance from employment and Medicare at age 65. Privately purchased health insurance can be very expensive. Be sure you account for it. Step number four is to annualize this amount. If you haven't already done so, you should basically take the monthly expenditure amount that you expect and turn it into an annual amount by multiplying by 12. And the reason I suggest to move it to an annualized number is because in the financial world, progress is most often measured in annual terms, specifically rates of return. You'll also calculate and pay taxes on an annual basis, among other things, so it's easier just to have it in an annualized number. Step number five is to multiply by 25 or divide by 4%. After giving you an earful about the importance of accuracy throughout this video, I'm now going to suggest that you begin making some approximations. I mean, the basic fact is you can't create a forecast without making some assumptions. Now, the good news is the rule I'm about to talk about has its basis in the backing of PhDs and lots of very smart people. It's also been used in the financial services industry for decades now, really. It's called the 4% rule, and it is the product of a study done by a trio of professors at Trinity University back in the late 90s. And what they more or less did was they figured out a safe withdrawal rate using historical data for a portfolio that had a mix of stocks and bonds that began withdrawing at a rate of 3 to 4% annually, and it increased with inflation, so they accounted for that. And what they found that for 30 years, a portfolio would last for at least 30 years. It was extremely unlikely to exhaust all the funds in the portfolio. So 4%, in other words, became a sort of safe withdrawal rate. And since you've navigated steps 1 through 4 already and you've got your annual spend number, you know how much 4% of your portfolio should be. So to calculate the total portfolio value necessary to support a 4% annual withdrawal rate, simply divide your annual forecasted spending amount by 4%, or more simply, you can just multiply it by 25 since that's the reciprocal of 4%. So for example, if you think you'll need $100,000 available each year to fund your retirement, then multiply $100,000 by 25 to arrive at a total of $2.5 million. That's your number. That's the amount you would need in a portfolio to support a 4% withdrawal rate, or $100,000 withdrawn each year. If you want to spend $130,000, just multiply that by 25 and get $3.25 million. Again, just multiply by 25 or divide by 4%. Step number 6 is to adjust for your retirement horizon. So I just talked about the 4% rule, and I mentioned that it was done for a 30-year retirement. If you retire in your 60s or later, then 30 years is probably a sufficient estimate. But what if you retire in your 50s or even earlier in your 40s? Your retirement could go 40, 50 plus years. As a result, you should adjust your safe withdrawal rate expectations accordingly so you don't run out of money before you die. So if you're hoping to retire in your 50s, I would use 3% as a safe withdrawal rate. If you're planning to retire in your 40s or earlier, I would go all the way down to 2%. These safe withdrawal rates are a bit on the conservative side, but I'd rather play it safe and retire with too much money than not have enough and run out. Now, a few other notes as we wrap up. In the opening, I stated that this process will provide an approximation of your number, and I'd like to reiterate that now. Even the most sophisticated financial plans will require adjustments as life brings the unexpected, both good and bad. In order to build a high degree of confidence in estimating your total retirement need or your number, I suggest making a plan using this process and revisiting it from time to time to make course adjustments. And as you enter the decade leading up to your retirement, you should also consider having a financial plan generated by a professional. If nothing else, it might be worth gaining the peace of mind that a professional can provide that reviews hundreds of retirement plans each year. For more on all things personal finance, including retirement, please visit martinmoney.com or our YouTube channel. As always, I'm grateful for your interest and your time. God bless and take care.